Hi, this video here is going to show you how to get started with the Zephyr IDE for Visual Studio Code extension. So I have Visual Studio Code right now open, but before we even start the extension, we need to install some dependencies. If we go to the Zephyr Getting Started guide, we will need to install the dependencies as per this section. For Windows, you can start off by using Chocolatey. So if you go to Chocolatey and if you go press the install button, you will be met with this page, and you can run this command in a PowerShell to install Chocolatey. Once you've installed Chocolatey, then you can run these two commands to install the dependencies. For Mac OS, you can do something similar with Homebrew, and Ubuntu, you just need to use apt install. So you can just run the sudo apt install. For Ubuntu, you'll also need to run this command here to install the Python 3 virtual environment. Okay, so now let's go ahead and install the extension. So Visual Studio Code is right now open to a folder called Test Workspace. If I go to the Zephyr IDE extension, I have this extension setup panel. All the commands here are also available in the command palette as well, so you can choose how you would like to execute them. There's an Initialize Workspace button, which will go through these 5 different stages, which you can also individually trigger if you like. I'm going to just go ahead and press Initialize Workspace. Here I have different west.yml templates I can use. So the first one is the default full Zephyr installation. The main difference is that Zephyr and all the modules will be installed into an external directory. Then I've got one for STM, that's a minimal install, minimal NRF, minimal STM and NRF, NRF Connect. We have the complete West default, so this will be again full Zephyr with all the modules, but it'll be in the workspace as opposed to in an external folder. I can select a west.yml file, or if I already have a .west folder in this directory, I can just mark West init as run without actually running West init. For this, I'm just going to select minimal stm west.yml. So the first thing it does, it has checked for build dependencies, and so we've already installed them. So it's past that. The next thing is setting up the Python virtual environment, and it's past that. Then it will install the SDK. When it installs the SDK, it installs the latest ARM SDK by default. But if you'd like a different one, you can go back here and select a different version, targeting a different architecture as well. Then the West init is run, and now it's doing a West update. So if I were to just go into my directory while West update is running, you can see I have a .venv that's been made, so this is the West environment. There is the .west. This here is going to point to the west.yml file, which is in this application folder. So here's the west.yml file that I've selected, which is minimal STM. So it just includes the seamsys, halstm, picolib, C, and segar. So if you want to instead, include everything, just go ahead and delete your full name on the allow list. We also have this path prefix set to external. So this is where everything is actually being sent to. The West update finished, but before we move on to actually making a project, I just wanted to show you the .west folder. And so here's the .west folder, and inside there we have this config file. And so this is pointing to the folder where the west.yml file actually is. So now let's go ahead and add a project. If we go here, we can press Create Project from Template, and I'll select Blinky. And now we have added a project. So what this actually did was, if I go back to the Explorer, it has created this Blinky project here. And it's actually from Zephyr, samples, basic, Blinky, and it's just copied Blinky over to this folder here. If I already have a project here, then instead of creating the project from a template, I can just add the project. So if I do that, I can then add Blinky this way instead. And I didn't do it. So I'll also add, let's say, Blinky PWM, just to show both of these. So here we have Blinky and Blinky PWM. And down here we have the actual active project. So the active project right now is Blinky PWM. And if I select Blinky, it changes to Blinky. The other way of changing the active project is by actually going to a file in that project. So if I, let's say, have main.c here, will open, and we'll open up Blinky PWM's main.c as well. So you can see Blinky PWM is right now selected, but if I switch to Blinky, the active project has been changed to Blinky. Okay, so now let's go ahead and add a build. So I press this button here, it'll add a build. So now we need to pick a board directory. So this is the default Zephyr board directory. If you have a board directory in your workspace root, that will also populate on here automatically. Otherwise, you can select another folder. I'm just going to select the default Zephyr board directory. Here we can now select Nucleo, let's say an F401, and I can give it a name for this build. That seems fine. I can select a debug optimization if I would like. So either debug, speed, size, no optimization, or I just don't set it at all, and in which case I will include a kconfig file that would have that build optimization set in it. In this case here, I'm just going to select debug. And there we go. I have selected and created this build right here. So if you look here, now the active project is showing Nucleo Blinky with the Nucleo F401 build. I can build pristine, build, and it says flash not available. That's because I don't have a runner set. So I can also add a runner to a build. So let's just press add runner and select whichever one we want. Let's just go with a J-Link. So now I can flash it with a J-Link. So let's just try a build real quick. And there we go, it's been built. So I can add multiple builds to a project. So if I just go here, and now it's going to again ask me for which board. So instead of a Nucleo F4, let's try an F0. So I'll enter an F0, and we'll call it that. And this time, let's debug it for speed. And so now you can see that that Nucleo F0 is over here. And then I can again build this one now, and now this one is building. So I can also add extra configuration or overlay files. So let's say I want to add extra kconfig, I can just press the add file button here, and I can choose how I want to add this file. Should it be an extra kconfig file, or should it override West automatic kconfig file? And what is the automatic kconfig file? So if you just go to the Zephyr docs, and here I am in the setting kconfig configuration variables. You read this section here, it'll detail how a conf file is used and when to use a conf file versus an extra conf file. Similarly with the DTC files, West will automatically select a DTC file, or it can use an extra overlay file. So based on that, you'll choose what you want to do. Did I actually add it? So I did not. So let's just go back here, and we're going to add an extra kconfig file, and I don't really have a good one, so we'll just do this prj.conf, and I'll press finished. Now you can see it's here. So this will apply for all builds of this project. But if I want it for just a specific build, like let's say those debug optimizations, those build optimizations, sorry, then I could add it to the actual build section here. Another feature is the ability to save the project configurations to a file on the workspace. So right now I've got this project with these couple builds in here. I can go to the Explorer, and let's go to settings.json. And so here we have the project with all the different builds, and here's the other project. And so I can also manually edit these files here. So if I wanted to share, let's say, the entire workspace with someone, I could just commit the settings.json file. I can also use a separate file. Let's say you have some local changes in settings.json and you don't want to modify them. If we go here, we can do Zephyr IDE, use Zephyr IDE JSON, and set this to true. And if I go back here and I'll just press save, so this will just manually trigger a save and this will manually trigger a load. And here we go. So now it's in a separate file to be shared that way. And so let's say again, let's say I want to just delete a build. I'll just delete this one here. And now we go here and I'll just press load projects and just have the blinky with the one build. Another important feature is the ability to manually trigger West commands. So if I were to go here and I can actually start a new Zephyr IDE terminal. When I start a Zephyr IDE terminal, it actually has all the environment variables needed to actually run West commands manually. So let's say I do West list. And so here we go, and it's showing all the different modules in there. So I can do a West build, whatever I like, directly in there. Just need to set this terminal up. And that's a brief overview of the Zephyr IDE for Visual Studio Code extension. There is another video on the channel that details a quick project setup of an STM32 board, and that will go through a bit more about the build, flash, and debug process. So if you're interested in that, I'd recommend watching it. Otherwise, thanks for watching.